I introduce myself. I am Father George, and I am a Syriac scholar that interested in whatever things happening here. And I have been working with Father Jacob from the very beginning of this institute, when the very idea was conceived, because we were studying together at that time in France and in Paris. So I have kept that interest throughout these years. I'm very happy that you are all here. Now we have presentations on three distinguished personalities in Christian history. First of all, we have a presentation on Severus of Antioch, then on Narsai, and then on Isaac the Syrian, or Isaac of Nineveh. We may have some reflections on this altogether later, but for the sake of time, I just ask our Brother Frédéric Alpi to begin with this presentation on Severus of Antioch.
Thank you, Father. First of all, I deeply thank Reverend Dr. Jacob Tekiparampil and his most efficient Syriac team for organizing this 8th World Syriac Conference and thus giving me the opportunity to address this congregation of friends and Syriac scholars in Qatar. My topic is Severus of Antioch, and I would like to raise again in this paper the question about to know if this great father of the Syrian Church was trained himself in Syriac language and culture. That is, to know if he was himself a Syriac scholar. This question is a recurrent matter of discussion and a rather touchy one, in which historical data and sentimental feelings up to now seem to get entangled, if I may say, and I would like to have a clear view about it. Who is Severus? As I had the honor to expose before the previous Italian conference, there are in fact two Severus, may I say Severuses, of equal importance and historical effectiveness. We have the historical Severus, or Severus #1. He was born about 465 and died in 538. He was Patriarch of Antioch between 512 and 518 under the reign of the Emperor Anastasius. He was an anti-Chalcedonian polemicist. He was an indefatigable opponent to the pro-Chalcedonian religious policy of Emperors Justin I between 518 and 527 and Justinian the Great from 527 to Severus' death in 538, though he went to a discussion with the later emperor at least 2 times in 538 and 536. And he was a prolific theologian and ecclesiastical writer who gave dogmatic treatises, homilies, especially 125 Homiliae Cathedrales, an impressive amount of letters, but the whole of it as a Greek writer. Therefore, his work is duly registered in the Clavis Patrum Graecorum, the precious repertory of Greek patristic authors established by Maurice Guérac and his followers in Louvain. This historical Severus, or Severus #1, belonged to the official imperial church. He was not a descendant. He wanted only the monarch to change his official theology within the state church and to adopt the doctrine of the unique nature of Jesus Christ. He did so with success under Anastasius, for Severus convinced him to publicly condemn Chalcedonism, and successfully under Justin I and Justinian, who restored the Chalcedonian or Theophilus doctrine as the empire official belief. This historical Severus, or Severus #1, is rather well documented by Severus' work itself, by Greek historians and pro-Chalcedonian polemicists such as Evagrius Scholasticus, Theodorus of Augustus, or Cyrillus Scythopolitanus, by the acts or scripts of the declaration of the ecclesiastical assemblies held in Constantinople against Severus, which were trials where he was sentenced 2 times in 518 and in 536. On the other side, the historical Severus is documented also at least by two Severus biographies, hagiographies we may say, but very well informed and instructive texts. The Vita Severi by Zacharias Scholasticus, a former fellow student in Alexandria and Berytus, and the Vita Severi by John, the bot of Beit of Tony. The whole of it, I repeat, is about a Greek ecclesiastical writer, a Greek-speaking historical actor who played a decisive role within the Greek Church of the Greek Christian Empire. Soon, doomed to destruction by Justinian's censorship, the written work by Severus and the pro-Severus literature disappeared in Greek and began to be translated into Syriac. This very process is in fact constitutive, if I may say so, of another personality, Severus II, the father of the Syrian Orthodox Church. Who is the father of the Syrian Orthodox Church, or this Severus II? He is no longer a physical person, but yet an agent in the historical process. The historical Severus, Severus I, died in 538, exiled in Egypt. Towards the end of this very 6th century, another church, non-Chalcedonian, is established in Syria, mainly in the eastern provinces and territories of the Roman Diocese of Orients. Besides, I would rather say, alongside with the imperial official church of Neo-Chalcedonian persuasion. It is mainly due to the action of Jacobus Baradaeus and not of Severus, dead some 30 years before. This church is definitely Syriac, and that's within this Syriac church that Severus's work and pro-Severus testimonies, originally written in Greek, have been preserved to us. For these anti-Chalcedonian Syrian Christians, Severus is the reference in theology, spirituality, maybe liturgy, that's a question, and a legal reference as well. By the way, his preserved letters, or partly preserved ones, are a major source for their canonical law. So, this Severus as a reference, this Severus II, the father of the Syrian Orthodox Church, no longer an historical person, is nevertheless an agent in the process of the constitution of the Syriac Christianity, a figure, a Syriac figure, one of the main ones. As I told you, this goes with the continuous movement between the 6th and 8th century of translation into Syriac of Severus's work. And we know quite well about it. First, we have Peter, former bishop of Callinicum. Callinicum is the modern unfortunate city of Raqqa on the Euphrates River. Peter of Callinicum translated the Homiliae Cathedralis after having been dismissed from his see by Justin in 590. And James of Edessa translated them a second time in the 8th century, and the monastery of Chemistry. Athanasius of Nicephorus in the 7th century translated some of the selected letters, and the whole dogmatic work was also translated. The monastery of Chemistry on the Euphrates, north to Aleppo, must have been an important center of translation between the 6th and the 8th century. Now, some originally Syriac texts were put under, about the same time, under the name of Severus. They are rather apocryphs. For instance, the Book of Hymns, due in fact to Paul of Edessa and revised later on by James of Edessa, possibly composed around a Severian core translated from Greek. This remains a matter of discussion. But anyway, most of it is apocryphal. The same goes true for various liturgical anaphorae, rather symbolically, though non-meaninglessly, attributed to Severus. This movement of translation, constitutive of Severus's figures, concerns also the pro-Severus biographies, Vitae Severi by Zacharias Scholasticus and John of Beta Toinia, which are disappeared in their original Greek version. The case of Zacharias Scholasticus is most instructive. He rallied at last the mainstream of the Imperial Church and even died after 536 as an Orthodox bishop of Mytilene in Lesbos Island. The part of his work dating after his rallying the official church remains in Greek. For instance, a Platonic dialogue entitled Ammonius Video Mundi, while the Vita Severi is lost in Greek and preserved in Syriac only. We have to add that the figure of Severus is of course much praised by the Syriac historians and chronicle writers, John of Ephesus, Michael the Greek, or Bar Hebraeus. So this new figure has appeared, rooted in the Syriac culture, and this makes of Severus a prominent agent with a great historical efficiency in the constitution and development of the Eastern Christianity. But now, what about Severus number one? The historical Severus himself towards the Syriac culture. Let's go back a little to Severus' biography. There is actually no place to be found in his real life for learning Syriac. No clue which may indicate such a performance skill. Let's sum up. He was born in Sozopolis in Pisidia, in central western Anatolia, then a land of Greek culture, with only possible local and Italian dialects remaining of use in the Greek country. For instance, his native city, Sozopolis, is a Christian name, the city of the saviors, or Zoopolis, which replaced the classical name of Apollonia, the city of Apollo. It was then Christianized, but Apollo himself had been associated to a local Anatolian deity called Sodzone. So from Sodzone to Sozopolis, there is a linguistical substratum. So we have a linguistical substratum maybe still underlying in the area, but we are definitely far from the Semitic and Syriac linguistic and cultural area. The only possible language that Greek to be known by young Severus is Latin. The provincial capital city of Pisidia is Antioch, not Antioch of the Orontes, but Antioch of Pisidia, the city visited by St. Paul according to the Acts of the Apostle. It was a former Latin colony dedicated to the establishment of Roman veterans after the conquest of the Roman East, exactly like Beirut in Phoenicia. Epigraphy shows that Latin had locally been in use until the early 3rd century. That was long ago when Severus bore, that was 465. And anyway, it came from Sozopolis and not from Antioch. Anyhow, Latin might have been a traditional specificity of the local elementary schools, the so-called grammatici or grammatical, and the future proficiency of Severus in Latin may have originated there. Being towards 20, Severus went to Alexandria University to complete and improve his education, and that's where Latin letters were taught to Eastern students. He met Zacharias here as a school, and his school friends tell us how so good a student he was, and so good a Latinist, I suppose. So he could enroll Beirut's famous law school the very next year, 1 year before Zacharias of Gaza. In Beirut, a good command of Latin was mandatory to fulfill the 5 years curriculum in law school. Severus will prove later how a theologian is good knowledge of this language. Is actually, I'm speaking under your control, is actually the only Eastern father I know able to quote such Latin writers as Cyprian of Carthago or Augustine of Hippo, the famous Western African fathers. Let us note, he never quotes Ephraim or any Syriac father on the other side. Though Ephraim was already known by the Cappadocian father, for instance. When he left Paris, he became a monk in an anti-Chalcedonian monastery near Gaza, in modern Palestine, very far has not been exposed so far to the Syriac language. He went in 508 to Anastasius' court in Constantinople. He might have met there the great Syrian doctor Philoxenus of Mabog, Hierapolis, Membage, It remains unclear, but even so, there is no reason to believe they would have communicated in Syriac at the Greek-speaking court of the Emperor Anastasius. And in 512, Severus is appointed Patriarch of Antioch, Antioch on the Orontes, this time, due to the Emperor's will, and possibly to Philoxenus' intercession. During 5 years and a half, until Anastasius' death, he promoted an anti-Chalcedonian policy, fulfilled an administrative job and a huge pastoral care in a large patriarchate he had totally and cleverly reorganized. There was no time for Syriac studies. After the rise of Justin I, Severus had to leave his Antiochian see and spend most of the rest of his life mainly in Egypt, far from the Syriac world. Now, as Patriarch of Antioch, between 512 and 518, that is less than 6 years, he was exposed to Syriac language and culture somehow. As effective Patriarch of the Roman East, the historical Severus #1, had nevertheless been somehow exposed to the Syriac language, at least 5 years and a half. My distinguished colleague and friend, Professor Pauline Allen from Australian Catholic University in Melbourne, together with Professor Wendy Mayer, a great specialist for John Chrysostomos and the Antiochian Fathers, told me once he must have had some knowledge of Syriac so that he could assume, as well as he did, his large and various duties. In fact, Severus' policies as Holy Patriarch of the God-loving bishops of the East, that is official title, was to realize the effective unity, the unity of these bishops, around his apostolic see, unity of faith, according to the anti-Chalcedonian doctrine, and institutional unity as well. The bishop of some 12 provinces of the Roman East had to agree on the same confession of faith, which implied a large exchange in communication of written documents. They had to follow the same disciplinary rules in close contact with the apostolic chancellery in Antioch through an abandoned correspondence. And this unity was concretely and contractually sealed when the bishop took part twice a year to the Patriarchal Synodical Deliberative Assembly, dealing with both dogmatic and disciplinary matters, and by the inscription of this communion on the liturgical diptychs. You know, the liturgical diptychs are the tablets, often ivory tablets, where are inscribed the name of the saints and person of holy repute, which are to be read during the office. Past bishops of holy memories, that is, or bishops of other cities, the local bishop is in communion with, and at first of all, his superiors, if I may say, the provincial, metropolitan, and the patriarch. This means a linguistical challenge in the Christian East, for the Diocese of Orient is bilingual. The city of Antioch, the Mediterranean coast, major cities of inner Syria are centers of great culture. But Edessa, Syrian East, Roman Mesopotamia do belong to the Syriac area, while both Greek and Syriac are used along the Euphrates Valley, as the authorities of Severus has showed us in his inquiry on Syrian hermits of his diocese. As a patriarch of the whole Orient, Severus had to be aware of these fundamental specificities to build up his communion, as we have seen. He had to overcome these differences and possible sources of local oppositions. For that, he must keep closely in touch with the churches of the Syriac domain, as well as those of the Greek. In Severus's days, we have monumental evidence of this necessary complementarity through some epigraphic documents, binding with Greek Syriac inscriptions. I take the example of a famous one, the dedicatory epigraphical text of a remote St. Sergius Martyrion found in Zebed, south to Aleppo. It is dated 25 September 512, less than 2 months before the elevation of Severus to the Apostolical See of Antioch. which took place on the 6th of November of the same year. The dated monument is now in Brussels, fortunately, alas, and a plaster copy is in Paris at the Institut du Monde Arabe. It reads, in fact, a trilingual text, Greek, Syriac, and Proto-Arabic, but I won't pay attention here to the Arabic version. The Greek text is the longer one. It reads, the saint to whom the place is dedicated, Saint Severus, the ecclesiastical authority in charge of the place, one periodicist, John, the donators, Aeneas and Sergius, the architects, master of the technical art of construction, and of course Greeks, one Simeon and one Leontius, plus local names, maybe complementary donators. And the Syriac text reads John the periodicist, one Mara who wrote the inscription, and I think the Syriac inscription. And the fundators, Annas, maybe the same Greek Aeneas in the Greek text, and complementary names as well. So, the Syriac version seems an adaptation with less official authority than the Greek one, but gives the name of the adaptator. This Mara, whose Semitic name, shows it does not belong to the Greek word. Anyway, we may recognize the will of the ecclesiastical authority, the local bishop, to translate into Syriac the ordinary and institutional patterns of the Greek church. One faith or one devotion, here St. Severus, and one authority, the periodicus. At a larger scale, this is very much the problem of Severus. How to cope with that? First, through correspondence among bishops of the Syriac domain who may be his local agents. First of all, Philoxenus of Marbod, Hierapolis, and Beijing, the great Syriac doctor, and who much contributed to his own elevation to the Antiochian see. Second, we have his nephew, Philoxenus of Dolichea, to the Dalak in Turkey. And such a person, such a bishop, who appear in Severus' correspondence, for instance, Marion of Sura on the Euphrates, a close friend, he chose to solve delicate matters. And second, we have the correspondence with many abbots and monasteries devoted to his cause and who belong to the Syriac domain. For the community of Mount Hishak near Gabula, and Gabula is close to the Zebed side. The dignitaries knew Greek and Syriac and could be so useful informators and interpreters of the Patriarch's policy toward the locals' faith. With Philoxenus of Marbod, it went even further. The Metropolitan Bishop of Euphratesia was a key advisor to the Patriarch. He gave advices of moderation in the touchy detect question, for instance, for he could appreciate the importance of the matter in the Syriac culture. In Edessa, he knew well enough the specificity of the clergy discipline due to a specific and ancient ecclesiastical history, and he showed to be the direct inspirator of the way Severus tried to solve this difficulty. In fact, Philoxenus of Marbod appears to be, between 512 and 518, the very delegate of the Patriarch of Antioch for the eastern part of his resort. Can we see here a prefiguration of the future Mafrianic institution of the Middle Ages? Outside of the empire, and still in the Syriac Christianity, we see that Severus is in epistolary relation with the faithful community of Al-Hira, headquarters and stronghold of the Lakhmid Arabic kings federated to the Sassanid and Persian Empire. Syriac was necessarily the language of this correspondence, and Philoxenus probably was also its inspirator. We know by Greek historian Theodoros Anagnostis that Severus sent 2 bishops to meet the Lakhmid king Al-Mundir. chances are they were Philoxenus himself. And maybe one Simon of Bet Aslan. This later bishop of Bet Aslan in Mesopotamia was a great wanderer. He witnessed the massacre of the Christian community of Najran in South Arabia by the Jewish dynasty Dhu Nuwas, or was firstly aware of this event, which took place during Severus's patriarchate. Simeon of Bet Aslan related the fact in a letter to another Simeon, abbot of Gabula. Gabula is close to the bedside. One about Simeon of Marishak near Gabula was expelled in 519 by Justin I, and the community of Marishak had received in 516 a letter from Severus. This may be then the same Simeon, Syriac correspondent of Simeon of Bet Aslan, and Greek correspondent of Severus. There is a knot of letters written whether in Greek, whether in Syriac, which shows here the duality of the language used in the official or para-official correspondence within the resort of Antioch. There should have been in the major chancelleries as well a board of translators. We know there were at the service of Severus, Carpes, archivists, legal counselors, the famous scholastic translators seem attested as well in remote places such as in Zebed. We have to think they were present also in the board of the patriarch. So, roughly for a quick conclusion, I think there is no necessity and not of all, no possibility to think the historical Severus himself knew Syriac language. This idea is inspired by the existence of the Severus II. It is a romantic retro projection, if I may say. So, Patriarch Severus between 512 and 518 was fully aware of the necessity to control the Syriac domain and of the means to achieve this consolidation of the See of Antioch. Among them, the institutional delegation of Eastern affairs to Philoxenus may be a solution to be developed in the future. For the present, the Patriarch had to enforce in its chancellery the office of qualified translators, and this practice may have facilitated in times to come the process of translating Severus' work as well. Thank you.
Take few minutes for some discussion on what has been presented to us by Mr. Alpi, Severus of Antioch.
About this Severus was a scholar, Syriac scholar. So any one of these two was a scholar. First one, as you said, he was not very much of Syriac. Second one, was he a scholar?
Language, the historical Severus,
Yeah.
and the figure. But the figure of Severus was effective for the process of the constitution of the Syrian Church. That very true. But he was no longer the patriarch of the Sikh family.
The Maronites accused Severus that he killed about 300 Maronite monks. Have you come across something about this?
Well, in fact, I wrote in a Lebanese review a little article about it. Well, this is a difficult question. Of course, I'm not so sure these monks were Chalcedonian. Were they Maronites? It may be slightly difficult to sustain according to the chronology, but there is no proof that they were related to any Maronite community. In fact, a massacre took place in Kefir Kamen, and I went to the place known to Aleppo. You know, you can see the it's a very well placed to organize a guet-apens, I don't think Severus himself was directly responsible for that, but even bishop of the place, as we say, évêque du lieu, I don't know the translation in bishop of the place. So this happened under his, how may I say, administrative responsibility. But you know, monks massacres are very common at the times. You know, there were also anti-Chalcedonian monks who have been in 512 killed in Antioch. You know, it's a very common affair for monasteries were in fact strongholds for the different Christological parties. So this specific affair, we know about it, for it is a grief against Severus in 518 and 536 during the assembly held against him, but it was very common in those institutions.
Well, the problem is the Maronite Church didn't exist at that time.
In fact, I'm going to tell you more than I would like. This episode of the 350 martyrs is first known.
Speak into the microphone.
Okay, I beg your pardon. This episode is first known in the Latin martyrologium. You know, it's first a Latin name, and it came to the Maronite memory through the Maronite college in Rome, when the Maronite priests here in Rome knew about it. And that's not all were Chalcedonian monks. They were in close terms with the Roman See, and that's exactly what Maronites of the 17th century are doing. We are Catholics. Our mission is to promote Chalcedonian and Catholic doctrines among the Orient East, and we are close linked with Rome. So they are exactly playing the role we are playing now, though these monks were Maronite. So this is not stupid, you know, but this is not history. It's ecclesiology.